don't know where to look, basically. Okay, we are live. I don't know where to look, basically. So
And we can start. Yes. Okay. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mihaela Poduranu, and today I will moderate this conference. First of all, I would like to let Liliana Popescu tell you a few things about this initiative, and then we'll continue with our keynote speaker and with our guest, Luciana Ghica. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of the National University for Political and Administrative Studies, and also on behalf of the Eastern and Southeastern Europe Fanel network, which is a network of experts, women experts in international relations. I had the pleasure of meeting Cynthia virtually in Zoom organized by University of Bristol a month ago or so, and she had the kindness to accept an invitation to speak with us in this webinar dedicated to the Me Too movement. So I just wanted to say this. Welcome, Cynthia. Welcome, Luciana. Thank you, Mihaela, for moderating. And I'm going to hand over to Mihaela the moderation.
Okay, thank you, Eliana. So just want to say thank you to all the people that are watching us, and also from the US Embassy to Emily Del Moron, who is watching us from the audience. And now I will introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Cynthia Enlow. I'm deeply honored to introduce you. She's an eminent feminist scholar. She's currently a research professor in the Department of International Development, Community and Environment at Clark University. Professor Enlow is one of the leading voices of feminism in international relations. And among her 15 books are the classic Banana, Beaches and Bases, the Curious Feminist, and Globalization and Militarism. Feminism make the link. Her latest book is The Big Push, Exposing and Challenging Persistent Patriarchy in 2017. She had 2 Fulbright scholarships and guest professorships in Japan, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as lecturers in Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Germany, Portugal, Vietnam, Korea, Colombia, Bosnia, Turkey, Brazil, and at universities around the US. Professor Enlow's feminist teaching and research have explored the interplay of gender politics in both the national and international arenas, with a special attention to how women's labor is made cheap in globalized factories, and on how women's emotional and physical labor has been used to support many governments' war-waging policies. Racial, class, ethnic, and national identity dynamics, as well as ideas about feminities and masculinities, are common threads throughout her studies. Her work has been an inspiration for many scholars working in the field, and also for Romanian scholars. I'm sure this would be a very thought-provoking discussion for all of us. So please welcome Professor Cynthia Enlow.
Mihaela, thank you so much. And Luciana and Liliana, it's because of you that I'm here. And I'm so glad to be speaking with everybody. I can't see you all, but I can hear you thinking. My father used to say, I can smell the wood burning. And what he meant by that is I can hear your brain at work. And luckily I had a father who thought I had a brain, which was very helpful. But I'm especially glad today to speak to the FANEL network. I don't know anywhere near enough about Southeast Asian, that was my specialty when I was in grad school, Southeast European gender politics. And Eastern European politics in general. I think I'm very much a learner, and you're going to teach me. When Liliana suggested that maybe it might be useful to talk about the hashtag #MeToo movement, which is the movement against sexual harassment of women, especially in the paid workplaces, I thought it really might be useful. And of course, again, I'm very greedy, so I want to hear your responses, because oftentimes it is imagined that what women put up with, and oftentimes that's what they do, they put up with silently, and they think strategically about what to wear to work and who not to get into an elevator with after work. And so they're constantly thinking about sexual harassment, even if they can't name it. But oftentimes that is imagined to be very personal, or it's imagined to be simply about the culture of a particular workplace that women have to put up with if they want to get ahead. Whereas, in fact, I think, and I'll be really interested in your reactions to this, I think it really is an international politics, not just a personal politics, not just a local politics, not just national politics, but it's an international politics issue. And the reason I've come to think that, I spent a long time, by the way, not being a feminist. I was never an anti-feminist, but I was a little slow coming to my feminism. And once you see it, you can't not see it. And I think several things about the hashtag #MeToo movement that makes it part of international politics that all of you with that expertise can really delve deeper into and challenge more effectively. First of all, it's an international movement, and oftentimes even using that phrase, hashtag #MeToo, but oftentimes translating it into Korean or into Portuguese or into Hindi. So it is to me a classic feminist transnational movement, in the sense that it draws inspiration from women sharing ideas and sharing strategies and sharing experiences across national boundaries, and then devising their own local strategies and deciding what is makes most sense and is most effective and is most meaningful to women struggling against sexism in their own countries. So, for instance, in India, the hashtag #MeToo movement, the movement against sexual harassment of women in the workplace, has dovetailed, that is, has shared ideas and concepts and strategies with women who already were organized against rape and the dismissal of rape charges by too many judges and too many prosecutors in India. And so when the hashtag #MeToo movement came along amongst Indian feminists, they immediately joined it up with their struggles for the justice, so-called justice system, and the policing system to take seriously all kinds of violence against women. In Korea, in South Korea, the hashtag #MeToo movement came at a time when more and more women were gaining positions in television news broadcasts. And so one of the first big cases in South Korea was against a very prominent, well-known male news anchor, feature news presenter. And it made a lot of sense, because it was precisely in this sector that was widely known that women were beginning to advance and being resisted in their advancement in the television news industry. In other countries, it takes a different version. So, and that's why it's really important to think like a feminist. You always think locally and globally simultaneously. So, for instance, in Austria, feminists in Vienna, just a couple of years ago, when I was, a year and a half ago, just before the shutdown for the pandemic, Austrian feminists said, well, what is particularly salient in Austrian national popular politics is what we are good at as Austrians in the Winter Olympics. We are very good at winning medals in downhill skiing. And thus, when a male ski coach, downhill winter skiing, when a male ski coach was accused of sexual harassment against the women trainees on the Olympic Austrian ski team, made news. That was big news because skiing is so much part of national pride in Austria. That wouldn't be necessarily the same in Portugal, for instance. So it's really important that the movement has general global understandings to share about the objectification of women, about the rights of women in paid work, about women being available sexually. Those are generalized ideas that we've all shared with each other across national and cultural boundaries. But when it becomes a movement of resistance in the name of women's rights, in the name of gender equity, then it has to have resonance locally. So that's always the way the most successful feminist movements have worked. And we know this from the history of all of your country's suffrage movements for women's right to vote. You have to think locally and share globally. Now, one of the things that strikes me about the international politics of abuse of women in the workplace is that it is part of an international politics of resisting violence against women in domestic spaces, in unpaid labor, and in paid labor, as well as in the political arena. That is, that violence against women has been conceptualized, that's all of us thinking, has been conceptualized as an obstruction, a major obstacle to women being full citizens. That is, the feminist idea of citizenship is so much deeper and so much broader than the narrow, oftentimes very legalized notion of citizenship, which depends on passports and place of birth. Feminist ideas of citizenship are about all women of all sorts being treated as and having the capacity to act as genuine citizens. And what we've learned, and we've learned a lot of this from those women who, for the last 40 years, or 50 maybe 50 years, have taken on domestic violence as a political issue and saying a woman who is being physically abused by a partner or a spouse in her own domestic setting, this place called home, that woman is being deprived of the capacity to act fully as a citizen. So citizenship is really at the core, I think, of the resistance to any kind of abuse of women, because it limits her voice, it limits her physical mobility, it limits her autonomy to act and think and speak her own mind in the public sphere. For those of you who are in international politics more generally, one of the things that I've been struck by is how the idea of national security, which, by the way, I'm afraid, maybe you do this yourself. I think feminists are always putting quotes around things, right? We always put quotes around things like security and national and nation. We always put quotes around them because we want everybody, including ourselves, to stop and pause and think, wait, what's the meaning of that? What's the common meaning of that? What's the genuine meaning of that? And national security is one of the ones that always deserves, when those two words are put together, always deserves quotes, because it is too often masculinized. That is, it's presumed, and you know this better than I do in your own work experience. Too often national security are lumped together as if it's one word, and it's imagined that only people with masculine ways of thinking, of masculine emotions, which means tamped down emotions, except for anger. You're allowed to be masculine and angry, not masculine and other emotions. And it's imagined to be a kind of area of expertise that men are best at. Now, of course, your whole life, all of you, challenges that simplistic, misguided, and wasteful notion. But national security is often thought to be the most public, even though it's secret. It's the area of public policy most draped in secrecy and non-transparent, but it's imagined to be kind of the height of, at the tip of the pyramid of what it means to be a public thinker and a public strategist and a public policymaker. But in fact, it's based on very shrunken notions of what the nation is. And oftentimes that nation is imagined as the current ruling party in Turkey imagines it, to be based on very patriarchal forms of family, which keeps the women domesticated and the man somehow the protector out there in the public. And it's also national security, one word, masculinized as commonly understood in many of your workplaces. National security also imagines security as a militarized form of protection. And we've all learned, we've taught each other, everything I know, I've learned from one of you or somebody else who's taught me. Security is too often shrunken down to mean the kind of security that can only be provided by a combination of a masculinized protector, a father, a boyfriend, a husband, an older brother, an uncle. A masculinized protector is what's necessary for women's sense of security. That's the patriarchal understanding. And secondly, it's imagined that security is best provided by people with weaponry, particularly armed police, armed security guards, and most essential for a nation, except for Costa Rica and Iceland, who've refused to have them, state militaries. So the militarized, masculinized, shrunken notion of national security is exactly what the Me Too movement challenges. Because the Me Too movements, everybody who's active in it in Korea and Brazil and India and Portugal and the United States and Australia, all of them say, no, no, who is the nation? A genuine nation is a usually physically bounded place where everybody is a full citizen. You cannot have a genuine nation unless everybody can enjoy and practice and believe in full citizenship. Secondly, feminists say, what is security? Security is about everybody being able to fully exercise their mental and physical capacities for the good of all. That's what security is. And if a woman is afraid to work late at the office because there is some jerk in the office, male person, who is likely to corner her after hours at work, then she's not able to use her full capacities. So sexual harassment is about, the challenge to it, the exposing of it, the speaking out about it, is about redefining what is national and what is security. Just as domestic violence prevention is about challenging the very narrow international notions and national and state notions of national security. It's why the Istanbul Convention is so important to all of you working in international affairs. And the Erdogan government's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention is something that should really worry all of you, because it's a challenge to all of your expertise. So when I talk about and think about, and we can talk more about this, about sexual harassment and the kind of skills you have to have, and all of us have to develop them. We're not born with them. Most of us aren't trained in our universities about what sexual harassment is and why it is so debilitating and why it is a violation of citizenship rights, not just labor rights. All of us are engaged in combating sexual harassment agency by agency. That means that all of us, and this is me and my university, any of you working for NGOs, any of you working for ministries, you have to, we have to be able to say, okay, is my Ministry of Foreign Affairs a place that has instituted such a hostile environment for women that it limits women's contributions, which then, of course, debilitates men, though they don't know it usually? You have to be able to do a feminist analysis of your own workplace, whether it's an NGO, a social movement where you're not paid, but it's still a workplace, you're working, or a ministry, or an international agency. You have to have those skills as well as the skills. To be a feminist is really hard, isn't it? But it's so exciting, right? Because you have to develop skills you never thought you had to develop. You have to be able to say, what happens at my workplace that makes it hostile for so many women? And at the same time, be able to talk about the Istanbul Convention and say why it's now should be seen as a pillar to every country's national security policy. You have to be able to do both those. You have to be able to explain to the skeptics why the Istanbul Convention should be seen as a pillar of both international security and national security. At the same time as you have to think, oh, why is it we go there after work to bond? Is there too much liquor going on there? But if we don't go, are we not considered a team player in our ministry? Even though a bar, a pub is a dangerous place for many women if they're with their male workmates. So we really have to develop such a range of skills, but that is how we are going to actually create gender equity in its fullest, deepest, and most authentic sense. So now I'm ready to be tutored by all of you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Cynthia. Excellent. I have a few anchors in your speech.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to add that those back home watching us, if they have any questions, they want to ask questions or they have a comment, please feel free to use the chat. We are live on our Fanel Facebook page and also on the page of the National School. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise them. Now, Dr. Olivia Toderan unfortunately wasn't able to join us anymore today, but maybe next time she'll be able to do that. Hopefully there will be, I'm sure that there will be a next time. I hope that there will be a next time. Now please allow me to introduce you to Luciana Alexandra Ghica. Luciana is an associate professor, founding director of the Center for International Cooperation and Development Studies at the Faculty of Political Science, University of Bucharest. She studied the political science and international relations at the University of Bucharest and also at Central European University and University of Oxford, where she specialized in the analysis of international cooperation processes. With a focus on the institutional and discursive impact of democratization and democratic values on foreign policy and international politics. She edited the first Romanian encyclopedia of the European Union. She co-edited the first Romanian handbook of security studies and authored a monograph on the relations between Romania and the European Union, as well as several studies on foreign policy, international cooperation, and the dynamics of political science as a discipline. And if I may add, Luciana, you were also very active in the civil society in the last months, especially before the decision regarding the use of gender in universities, and you worked very hard for making your voices heard and for supporting the right to continue to use this and to have this approach on gender studies. So thank you, and thank you very much for joining us today. Please.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind presentation, and for the opportunity to have a relaxed talk on something that is not relaxing at all, unfortunately, and to have a talk that is beyond our institutional boundaries. One of the first problems that sometimes we have is that even if we have the opportunity, we do not communicate enough, because sometimes we are in rival position, institutionally speaking, and this may hurt all of us on the long run. So I'm very grateful also for the bridges that we are building nationally among various institutions and internationally as well, not just in matters related to gender, but in matters related to science and solidarity and honesty in knowing things. And knowledge, I think, is probably the key word here. And thank you, Cynthia, for your insightful food for thought. There's a lot there. And my comments would be related to my training and expertise as an international relations scholar at the intersection with political science, mostly comparative politics and social theory. So I'm not a gender studies scholar, but indeed during the last year, I've been forced to, by the context, to and by my spine to be a little bit more visible publicly, not just in academia. And like Cynthia, as a scholar, I have been for a long time not very aware of the necessity of looking at the feminist dimension. And many of us in my generation were thinking that if we were smart enough, we should just be like macho men, basically, because that was the model to emulate, because that's the idea of being smart in academia for many of us. And even if we were exposed to theories in grad school, for instance, abroad, while we were studying, including your classic, Banana Beaches and Bases, that didn't have an impact on many of us in my generation studying international relations, even if many of us were beyond the classic paradigm of security as a patriarchal construct. So I think that one of the key issues that we probably should be taking into account is related to how should we study such issues from the point of view of social scientists in IR, in political science, or in social sciences in general. How should we approach that? I like very much the fact that you emphasize the idea of citizenship, and in part incomplete citizenship when domestic violence is present, because you no longer have the rights that you would have with citizenship. And I like this framework very much, with putting into the framework of human rights. But I think that somehow this misses the point that there are people who do not have any type of citizenship. And if we are focusing just on the idea of citizenship, which is very helpful in some of our contexts, we might again miss a lot of the people who might be in more vulnerable situations, especially, for instance, refugees, stateless persons, where we might have a lot of sexual harassment that is not visible. And when I'm looking at such things, since I'm a scholar, I usually tend to look first at what my colleagues first research, at those who are into these. And to my surprise, there is still very, very, very little on the Me Too movement. Well, there are about 700 articles in the Web of Science, our usual database for new articles. And it's very interesting that they are from a lot of fields, mostly women and gender studies. There are some from political science, but less than 40. Almost nothing in IR, but there are in choreography, there are in computer science, there are in engineering, and they are treating issues related to Me Too. Mostly those that are outside our field are about the impact in the profession. So it forced many of us in many fields to reflect upon this in our own profession. So it's very much related to what we're saying, that in each case we should see what we can do at home in our own institution and reflect and contribute to that. And from this perspective, I think that it is more than just an international movement. It's also an interdisciplinary movement, or transdisciplinary in the sense that it goes beyond the usual suspects. It's not just in social sciences. Also, computer scientists found the hashtag relevant enough, fashionable enough to make some data analysis on it. But with not so spectacular results. What I found most interesting, of course, was from my own field in political science, where for data, particularly on US data, so it's quite limited, but still quite interesting, is that the power of the hashtag is stronger in context where civil and political rights are already strong. And this is something that is extremely relevant if this observation is extrapolated as a larger scale, because it also shows us that, correlated with other findings that news outlets reported on media outlet on the Me Too movement, mostly when it was about celebrities. It also tells us that such movements are quite important for many of us in the, for lack of a better word, but it's highly weighted and very bad, in the first word. So it's a first word problem in many ways, in the sense that it is based on celebrity, and we are affording to speak about this to a large extent. It's put forward by celebrities, and it is framed in a celebrity type of narrative when it is presented to the general public. This is important also for the others, because it gives courage. If celebrities are seen doing something and that they have the courage, it can inspire also. But is it enough to protect those who are more vulnerable? And ultimately, it is about that. We are talking about a Me Too movement right now because we had an episode, but the Me Too hashtag exists for almost a decade. Research on sexual harassment from an international relations perspective has existed mostly in relation to research on war, and it is not very often put in the spotlight, even if there are incredibly useful analysis on this from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s too. So we have decades of research on that. We have a lot of knowledge on many different contexts, but we still do not know about it. So what the Me Too movement, I think, did at international level was to force us, for a new generation and to a much larger extent, to speak about uncomfortable things. This can also take a toll on researchers. I have colleagues who studied rape in war situations. And studying this is not just going to field where you're not going necessarily to war, but it's not desk research. There were interviews with victims that, well, as a social scientist, you take interviews quite often, but most people who researched that needed also psychological counseling after a while for traumatic depressions. Hearing such things is incredibly difficult, also not just for the victims, but also for those who are doing proper research on that. So if we are wondering why we still have little research on that is published, and also little research that is visible to the public, on the one hand, I think that if it's not about celebrities, sometimes it's difficult to sell to the general public, with several consequences, some positive, some negative. But at the same time, it is not an easy topic for any researcher. And also, as an insider in academia, it may be easily dismissed as a research topic for lack of funds. Sometimes, but also because why should you listen to women? I mean, there are many other, or to men who have been raped, who have been sexually harassed, or to sexual minorities who have been sexually harassed. Why? Why is that a relevant topic? So we still have within academia subjects that are prestige and that would ensure your career advancement, and subjects that are dismissed. We still have this, we're stuck in reverse in many ways. We're still thinking that there are subjects that are not worth paying attention to. And this is, I think, related to the way we are imagining science, and we are still into, for lack of a better word, call it patriarchal ivory tower, single author type of writing, where we think that what they were studying is prestigious. So mostly theory of a certain type, not very data-based, and that is the most important type of knowledge. So in this sense, we are still the slaves of a scholastic medieval type of thinking, and not of a modern scientific way of thinking, where any subject is worth of scientific inquiry. So my hypothesis about this difficulty of having these issues heard and understood, and also presented to the public, and also known by the public, so understood by the public, so we need some awareness there, is threefold. And with that, I will finish. So first of all, is related to the fact that we hear about such issues when there are problems, and mostly in context of celebrities, whether politicians who harassed or some actresses that have been victims. This was the dominant narrative, and it is difficult to move from there. Second, it is difficult to research this subject and to still remain sane sometimes, and it's also something that is difficult to frame in a way that produces something new and relevant for a larger audience who is not familiarized with that. And finally, I think that the longer or more structural reason for which we tend to neglect such subjects, which is inherent to the way scientific knowledge is still perceived, especially in some contexts. So bottom line, if the argument that was put forward by our colleagues who observed that the Me Too movement was more powerful, was stronger in context in which civil and political rights were more frequently respected, this means that in academia, in scholarly environments, the better democratic institutions we would have, the more transparent and the fairer institutions and institutional procedures we would have, the better the science and the better the public service that we could do for this, including from an international relations perspective. I will have some comments after Liliana's comments as well. Right now, I just wanted to put something related mostly to the structural things and not just particular to IR, but perhaps in the questions we might discuss more related to the special discipline of international relations, which might be more relevant for certain people in the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vika. And now, please let me introduce you to Professor Liliana Popescu. Liliana is doctor habilitated at the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest and presently the Vice Rector. She holds a PhD in Political Theory from University of Manchester, and she was advisor to the Minister and head of the Policy Planning Unit within the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Her publications include the books The Construction of the European Union, Gender Politics, Individual Freedom and Political Manipulation, Bucharest, 2003, founder and co-editor of the Romanian Journal of Society and Politics since 2001, and contributor to Foreign Policy Romania. Also, Dr. Popescu has a long history of pioneering in the area of civic and public campaigns, in the area of gender equality and diversity acceptance. So, Professor Popescu, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mihaela. Thank you very much, Luciana, for your speech, which raised a number of very, very important issues. I think you spoke more like an academic. I'm going to speak more like an activist, even though I'm also an academic, but I think that activist speech is really necessary at this point. I'm going to refer a little bit to what Cynthia and what you said, just very briefly to say that I think that the connection between the Me Too movement and the national security issue is extremely important. And it is very important for us to raise this issue and write about it, because otherwise the masculine view and perspective on national security is going to continue to prevail. And I think this might have very deep consequences on including world peace. But not only. It's about the welfare of people, it's about the welfare of citizens, it's about the welfare of the majority of women. I very much liked this connection, and I very much liked the issue raised by Luciana, talking about first world and other worlds, second, third world. I think this is a big issue in the third world. I think it's a big issue in Romania, in the Balkans, where we are in a sort of, I don't know, at the edge of some worlds. I think related to, I think that Luciana mentioned a very important issue, the acceptability at the academic level of studying issues like this, studying Me Too movement, studying generally gender issues, because we had and still have and still are under attack. the gender studies are under attack in this country and also in other countries around us. In Hungary, they succeeded to move them out of the country to Austria and other places. In Romania, they didn't, and I'm very happy. And I'm happy that this is the way I met Cynthia, basically, because she was one of the academics who supported our university action to submit an amicus curiae to the Constitutional Court in support of the viewpoint of the president, actually, which said this law doesn't seem like being constitutional. So, so I think this is an important issue, whether we are allowed to study academically this subject, and I think we have to make our point and we have to present it in any way possible that this is a legitimate academic subject of study, full stop. Nothing should prevent us from doing research on these subjects. Now, because yes, because Luciana also mentioned a few things about women. Somehow this made me think, it's an idea that I just wrote down, about the difference. Yes, you mentioned, you said something that in the first world, in the Western world, this is the Me Too is a subject of stars, of actresses, of public figures, and somehow this is downplaying what is happening in other places with less in less glamorous environments, in other workplaces. And because we are in the Balkans, this idea came to my mind that in our world, somehow, and I'm speaking now about Romania, and I think that this is valid for other countries around us, there is a normalization of being submissive as women. So somehow many women behave submissively and accept various behaviors from men in workplaces because they sort of internalize that this is part of, normal to be a woman like that. Now, we have two major models, let's say. The model of the woman who uses her charms in order to make her to become socially known. And this is a model which became prevalent in the last 30 years, I believe. Or it's anyway a powerful, I don't know whether it's prevalent, maybe it's too much. Maybe it's too much. But there is this solid model, if you want to be successful socially as a woman, then either you marry or you use your charms, to scale up wherever. So this is the role, the model of mistress's role. I mean, just to give it a label. There is the other model of women who are trying to succeed in their profession on the basis of their qualifications, on the basis of competencies. And I think Me Too is about this model. It's not about the first one. The first one is trying to say, I don't want to know anything about Me Too model. I'm successful. I succeeded in media. I'm I don't know, a star, a media star. I'm I don't know, an actress, well-known, so on and so forth. So we are talking about this kind of, so Me Too has to do with women who want to be competent and appreciated for who they are and what they succeeded by their own efforts, not because of their physical, not only physical, psychological charm. Anyway, so just to go back to the Me Too movement, I just want to say a few words. First of all, about the fact that Me Too movement draw attention on the scale of the world scale the scale of phenomenon of harassment and sexual abuse. And I have a figure from the World Health Organization that says that this phenomenon affects 1/3 of all women in the world. And of course, this is what has been documented. We don't know about what is behind these figures. To come back to the effect, I think that there are two major effects, or at least two major effects of this Me Too movement. I think it unfolded solidarity potential between women of all kinds of from the whole world and from all kinds of environments. So I think it opened this avenue of worldwide solidarity. And I mean, our meeting today, I think it's a proof, you know, that we are trying to connect and see what is common and what is different. And a second effect that I identified, that I think that from the viewpoint of men, the situation started to become more complicated in the sense that this phenomenon made men to get out of their comfort zone. The comfort zone was, you know, it's normal to make some gestures of, I don't know, some sort of sexual gestures, whatever, you know, related to our colleagues. But this Me Too movement actually put a question mark in relation to this submissiveness of women and to women accepting all these gestures. There are many things to say about the movement, Me Too movement. I would put it in touch with what is happening in the world, and particularly in our region, and probably not only in our region, but this is I'm aware of. I'm talking about this resurgence of conservative values. And this is something that affects us. This is what made a number of governments in the region to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. Just a very short comment about the Istanbul Convention, because I was really I was puzzled by this resistance to this convention. This convention basically details the ways in which women can be harassed, can be abused, can be sexually abused, can be physically abused in the public space and in private life. So, you know, my question was, well, why be against that? I mean, why would one be against protecting by law, by a European law, against this? And I found the answer. The answer is in the way in which the Istanbul Convention defines gender, because gender these days is a very contested concept. And in the Istanbul Convention, gender is defined, and it says, I'm quoting from the Istanbul Convention, it says, gender shall mean the socially constructed roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for women and men. So basically, those conservatives in the world and in the region who are contesting this notion of gender, they are contesting the difference between sex and gender. So what would they like to do? They would like to identify women with their sex and with their reproductive role and forget about everything else, about all other roles women have. And I think we all agree that this is completely unacceptable. And I think this is something that women across the world
Okay.
don't accept. I'm
Yeah,
going to stop here because I have many other things to say about what is happening with this conservative movement in our country and in our region. But I'm going to stop here just to leave room for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liliana, for your presentation. Any thoughts on the problems raised? Luciana or Cynthia, if you want to add something, please.
Oh, well, first of all, this is so exciting. The whole discussion is so exciting. A couple of things. Luciana, you're absolutely right. My notion of citizenship, I should have said it, doesn't depend on which papers you hold. It's your capacity and your right to take part in public life. And that includes whether you happen to be a displaced person or a refugee. So thank you for warning us all about using the idea of citizenship without making really clear what we mean by citizenship, which is not a statist, documented form of citizenship, but is our full selves as part of public life and international life. So thank you for that really good warning. The question about the media and the media only having a narrow definition of what is a story, that is what they think is worth putting into the newscast or into their social media site or into their print newspaper. A couple of things I've learned, I dig way deep into these, every case that comes up, I learn something. And what I've learned is these people who work in entertainment for social media, but also television and film and radio, they actually have work sites. They are in industries. And once you kind of dig deeper into what a script writer, whose name you've never heard, but she works in the film industry in Romania, or in Mumbai or in Hollywood. A script writer is working in a workplace of a big industry. And that industry has all kinds of power relationships, just like a architecture firm has power politics, an academic workplace has power politics, a foreign ministry has foreign politics. And one of the things I've learned by actually taking seriously these people who have spoken out about sexual harassment in entertainment life is that they are workers in an industry. They are not that different than a woman who's working on the assembly line in a garment industry. She's more, in fact, the script writer is more like the woman sewing name brand garments in a Dhaka, Bangladesh garment factory. She's more like that woman than she is like some big star whose name we've heard of. So that's the first thing, is that every supposedly celebrity or politics working for a parliament or working in a ministry, those places are work sites, and they should be understood as work sites. And the people who work in them, most of whom we've never heard the names of, and we wouldn't recognize if we were in the grocery store with them, those people are working in work sites. And what we are learning is that in these industrial work sites, whether they're entertainment or electoral politics or bureaucratic civil service work sites or a factory or a law firm, that people have rights as workers in a work site. And it doesn't matter who you're charging with sexual harassment, abuse. They are also workers, and they're trying to wield their power and their influence in that work site. So I read about women harassed on automobile assembly lines, women harassed on garment worker factory lines, women who are harassed in architectural firms and law firms and in film companies. And you know what? They have more in common than they do difference. The other thing is about, and I think it's a really good thing to ask about, what kind of civil society capacities exist when a woman is harassed and has the mindset and the language to want to speak out about it. Who does she go to? And that really matters. Who does a person who's being a woman, or a girl who's being harassed, who does she have to go to? Does the law support her, even if it's not implemented? Are there support groups out in society, a women's movement, to support her? Is there a good labor rights movement that isn't so male dominated that they only think wages are a labor issue and they don't think about sexual harassment as, I mean, you know, having a union, but the union is highly patriarchal, doesn't really defend a woman who wants to speak out about sexual abuse in her workplace. So you have to have a feminist informed labor movement. And then the final thing, because there are so many things here to talk about, and that is to take seriously what it means to be able to have the skills to analyze your own workplace. And I think that Liliana is so right about this, that those skills don't just come from being a good person. And they don't, this is what a lot of guys want to convince us, oh, I have daughters, so therefore I know. Well, you know, we all know that's not true, but guys like to think it, you know. I mean, how many, I heard many too many guys say, well, I have daughters, so, you know, I wouldn't be a harasser or I would support anybody in my, well, no, you actually have to study it. And women's and gender studies is a discipline that rigorously develops particular skills that I certainly didn't learn as a political science PhD at University of California at Berkeley in the famous Berkeley era of the 60s, where we were challenging all kinds of power. Well, we didn't even study the patriarchal forms of power, much less learn the skills to research it. And so I think Luciana and Liliana, you're really underscoring, starting in secondary school. I mean, why wait for university? And a lot of women and men don't ever go to university. Starting in secondary school, we have to learn the skills of gender analysis. And I'd say start with your own family. If you're looking for a research site, see if you could do a gender analysis of at least 2 or 3 generations of your own extended family about submissiveness, about competency, about pay, about income control, about who drives the car when a man and a woman is in the car, about whose paid work matters more, about who can afford to work part-time because really they don't have a career, about which kid should go to expensive universities and which kid can end right at 15. Try doing a gender analysis. I'm saying this to everybody. Try doing, I mean, I've tried to do one of my family and it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable, but I've tried to, you know. My mother was highly educated, but my father had an idea that, you know, to be a middle-class man, he was a physician, he had to have a wife who didn't have a paid job, right? So gender analytical skills are skills. They are not just being nice. Nice helps. I'm all for being nice, actually. I like nice. But gender analytical skills have to be learned. They have to be tested. They have to be mentored. They have to be practiced. They have to be refined. They have to be thrown out and redefined. And they have to be taught in gender and women's studies courses. I would say anybody who's going to graduate school in any field, and especially international relations, don't come out of that program without being able to do a gender analysis of the Ebola crisis program in DRC, where we now know there was a lot of sexual harassment. There is a lot of sexual harassment of international workers, health workers in the DRC, in the delivery of Ebola prevention care. Can you do it? You can't come out of a graduate program in IR unless you can do it. You can't come out of a graduate program in IR if you can't do a gender analysis of every peacekeeping operation. Everyone. So there's hope, there's solidarity, and sometimes there's even laughter.
Solidarity, I think, is a very important thing to mention, and we still have to work probably on that. So, Luciana, please, if you want to add something.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the reaction and for the comments. And I think that there are several keywords here that are worth insisting a little bit on. And of course, solidarity is one of them, but also the one on visibility, and the one that tends to be put aside, that's on the labor movement. If we are talking about the post-communist context, not just Romania, the labor movement, even as a field of studies, labor studies or issues related to work conditions or issues that might in any even slightly way remind of the communist past, are set aside, are not considered legitimate or useful to. And trade unions, because they were associated with the former communist party, who were the Social Democrats. Now Social Democrats are associated to the trade union movement because it was a mass party, but also for other reasons, are discredited. So we do not have a trade union movement as in other countries. For instance, we do not have the studies. We do not even teach about trade unions. These are it's ridiculous. You wouldn't find, except for very specialized programs, usually at master level, and these are less than 5. There are actually just one in, and it's in CNSP actually, and there are some other programs, but small details in sociology in various departments. But this is very, very, very specialized, and it's a minor thing. So we do not really get to understand what is the structure of the labor force, what are the work conditions. So we have a very limited worldview. And at the same time, in the post-communist environment, not just in Romania, and here we have a lot of studies on that, we tend to have, after an imposed communist perception of the world and more communal way of thinking, a very individualist and a very particular type of individualism, which comes with the 1980s, basically, Republic, US, basically, neoliberal economic agenda, which conflates liberal thinking with neoliberalism, although they do not have anything. So we are forgetting humanism and universalism and the pan-humanist ideas, and we're conflating them, and we are under that label. We might have very abusive behaviors because we are not making such distinctions. So we do not have this conversation for the moment, and that also structurally makes the discussion on gender issues not only marginal and discredited, but also very difficult to explain to the larger public, because even if many would understand the unfairness of being paid too little for too much work, it is still in this model of being a survivor. ultimately, and working, you know, the Goldman Sachs model basically right now, working. And if you're not doing it, you're not good enough. So if you're not having this conversation, it will be difficult to have a conversation about gender as well. This doesn't mean that we have to have one first and then wait for the other, because like that we are not going to have it. But we need some more solidarity, and we need some more intersectionality of other types. So we need to discuss, and that's why I think that the label Me Too is particularly useful, because in many ways it's not gendered. It is gendered initially, and many associated with sexual harassment in women, but it can speak about more things, and it has been seen as something more. And I'm very proud of our younger students who are a little bit more, sometimes not that vocal, unfortunately, still, but more aware of such issues, because they are following and they understand, but they still do not know, as you rightly put it, they do not know to whom they should address a question when they are in trouble. We often, as professors, sometimes, and it's not just about young women, it's also about young men who are in this position very often, and they are bullied to bully others as well, and they are bullied if they are trying to express solidarity as well. And they do not know this model of authority which exists and is still dominant in school, especially before coming to the university, is still frightening for many, and we do not have yet the infrastructure to help students to, especially college students who are in the position, well, that's basically roughly the period when their sexual life might begin, and they do not have any guidance. There is no sexual education in schools. The information that they have is lacking. There is increasing bullying in schools, and at the university level, for instance, we do not have in any way visible structures that could help. And even the few structures that might be there, such as ethics committee or council of whatever hierarchical, these are not credible, because they have rarely listened to students or to those who were abused. And we do not have institutional mechanism that would really protect. So sometimes it takes a lot of time and a lot of cases, and often even when the universities are trying to repair the abuse against students, not necessarily sexual, sometimes they are just punishing a certain person that was more visible, but no structural change happens. And we arrive to know about some things only after the situation became really very bad. We had students, for instance, who were harassed by their own peers, and there was revenge porn, for instance, and they had absolutely no way to find support. And it was incredibly stressful for them, and very frustrating for us as professors to find out that our students were victims of that, and they had never got the courage to ask for help from adults. Let's say, even if they were, of course, also no longer minors, but still, because they do not trust authority. We do have in Romania the level of trust, irrespective of the area, is quite low. The social trust, and we also do not have institutions that are visible, even if there are increasingly. There are more initiatives that are doing a lot for explaining such things in Romania, and Liliana was right to emphasize also the activist part of this discussion, because it is part of the conversation, and it should be brought to the universities and to schools, as you rightly put it, before the universities, because very few are still going to the university. Probably mentorship programs would help, and also visibility. But as you rightly put it as well, with this idea of being able to do a gender analysis in our own workplace, yes, many of us are able. But then what? What should we do after we're doing the analysis? We know that we have colleagues that are fearful of knowledge, actually. In this sense, it's about insecurities a lot. So they are afraid of even asking the question, what are those colleagues who are studying gender doing? No, 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 gender is just bad. And they might take revenge on some students, for instance, in forms that are difficult to prove officially, for instance. Or they could even harm colleagues in ways that are difficult to prove officially, or to fight on the long run and to maintain your mental health. So the question is very practical. Okay, we know that we have a problem. We know this. We understand which are the problems. We know that these people are actually insecure, and they have been brought into a context of toxic masculinity narratives, and they are just behaving like that because they are fearful. And this applies not only to men, but also to women who are afraid to acknowledge the fact that we need to discuss about that. And we have generations of women, my mother's generation, for instance, who is still afraid to use the term feminism, considering that that would be a very negative term, and it's still not associated with the idea of equal rights, equal representation, equal respect of men and women. Is just the myth that women would like to do whatever to men, or being superior or whatever. So this idea of equality is not there. There is a fear, and it's not a fear of change necessary, but a fear of knowledge, the fear of discovering something that might not confirm your own biases. And this is a major problem for this intergenerational solidarity of both women and men, and also a problem of solidarity among different types of genders, and also there's a problem related to solidarity beyond the issue of gender, which might actually promote a little bit more even the discussions on gender. So I think that's more or less the context in which we are right now in Romania, but also in the larger area of post-communist countries, even if there are more than 3 decades from the fall of the communists. I will stop here because there are probably more interesting additions to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luciana, for your comment. Just wanted to mention that we received a Facebook comment, so you have it here in the chat, but if you want, I can read it also. So actually, the three is that from Ana Maria Luca, the three is that in Ireland, in most social sciences, research on women's studies are seen as fluff compared to masculine research topics such as war, security, conflict, terrorism. In fact, this is one of the blind spots of IR culture, is another one. And this is totally due to the fact that most research coordinators in IR, as well as most IR think tankers, are men who are not skilled to think in terms of gender. So probably, so therefore the question is related to the question, who decides what is relevant, who decides what topics can be researched actually. So maybe if the panelists would like to, in a minute or two, say something about this, and then we'll wrap up. And yeah.
Well, let me just start by saying one of the things that and Liliana will have a lot to say about this. One of the things that I learned, because I remember what I was like when I wasn't a feminist. I mean, I luckily didn't go too long, but I went all the way through my PhD. I wrote, I hate to tell you, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 books without any feminist curiosity, you know. So the good thing is I remember what I missed. And what I would say to people in international relations and political science and the other social sciences who they don't get it. They don't see why you should ask gender curious questions about everything. about the UN Security Council, about weapons trade, about nuclear politics, about international peacekeeping, international humanitarian aid. You ask gender questions about everything. And to somebody in a narrow definition of international relations and political science who resists that or says, oh, that's sociology, that's their way of being dismissive, by the way. It's very hierarchical, you know. We're the serious people, that must be sociology. Anyway, the thing that I've learned is that the narrow definition of international relations as a field is that it doesn't understand power. They think of themselves as very manly because they think they are specialists, more than anthropologists, for instance. They think they're specialists in the workings of power. That makes them feel, you know, kind of macho. But in fact, what is striking about the ungender curious international relations people is they don't get about power at all. They don't even understand how power works, because if you don't understand the workings of patriarchy, you don't understand the workings of sexism, you don't understand the workings of misogyny. If you're not curious about it, you don't investigate it, you don't read about it, you don't learn to teach about it, then in fact, you're naive. And if there is one thing that people in international relations who pride themselves on their masculinity, no matter how they dress or how they, you know, behave, they hate to be called naive. They think we're naive because that's what a feminist is. No. What we've learned, and we've learned by, you know, listening and studying and doing research, we've learned that power has so many more forms than the conventional international relations specialist imagines. So to all of you out there who have a hard time kind of working with your, don't insult them right away by calling them naive, but give them a sense that there are many forms of power that they have not learned how to analyze. And if they want to be serious, that's that loaded term, right? That Luciana mentioned, serious, is a very loaded term because it is a currency of authority. It is a currency of status. Serious is as it's a weapon. It can be weaponized for the sake of dismissing some people and elevating others. But if you want to be taken seriously without that patriarchal meaning you want to be realistic, you want to be fully informed so that you can be a fully competent analyst of power, then you have to learn how to ask gender questions, and you have to take seriously feminist analysis of international politics, because otherwise you're engaged, they are engaged, or me before I became a feminist. What I was an underestimator of power.
Thank you.
Agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that actually harassment and all these manifestations, aggressive or attempts at aggressive manifestation in relations to women in workplace, I think they are manifestations of power. It's a matter of power relations.
Absolutely.
And I think that many women underestimate the power relations they are in when they work in universities, as we do. And because we don't have too much time left, I think maximum 5 minutes, I will just focus a little bit on universities, which are workplaces. And because Cynthia was mentioning the importance of these institutional arrangements to tackle potential cases of aggression, of harassment. Just to say the experience of my university. So we had a case of sexual harassment, which happily it was unfolded. I mean, the student had dared to expose the situation. we all know in the university that there are many other cases, or they occurred in many other cases before, but they were not documented. You know, in such cases, the student, or the, for that matter, maybe even a lecturer or assistant, or, you know, somebody who works in the institution, we don't have such mechanisms. So she dared, and there was sort of an ad hoc solution to the issue, in which the Commission of Ethics was put to work. And in the end, the academic who was the accused person, he was um, sanctioned, in the sense that he was not allowed to have relations with students any longer, and he got the position of research in the university. I'm just mentioning facts here. I'm not saying anything. I'm a vice rector in this institution, and I wouldn't like to criticize my own institution in this environment. I'm just stating facts. Also, I may also say that in my university, a group of students, or women students, most probably emboldened by the fact that we have a program in gender studies, they had the initiative of setting up a group among them to expose sexual harassment in universities. So we have that. Lately, of course, we have this pandemic. I don't know what happened with the group, but there is a seed. Let me put it like that. On the other hand, if we look at the National Council of Rectors, there are almost, I think that at this point there are only males, if I'm not wrong. So I think, I mean, to my mind, we should be able to put in place at the level of the country, of all universities, you know, so we should try at least to set up such institutional arrangements, to have them in place in cases that there are such attempts. And but yeah, I think the best way, at least until we put in place such arrangements, I think that the best thing to do is to equip women with knowledge about the situation, with psychological skills, and first of all, with this awareness that we are living in power relations wherever we are. Some women, you know, they use their charms, and I mean, sometimes this might be a dangerous game. But generally, you know, we don't want to mix sex with workplace. Generally, no, workplaces are workplaces; they are not sex places. So I think this is what is needed. You know, I think women, particularly students, need to be educated somehow. I don't know, somehow. Yeah. So I think I'm going to stop here, because I want to go 1 hour and a half, and we would like to thank the people who facilitated, who helped us in this endeavor.
Okay, thank you very much, Liliana. And I would like to thank all the people who have made this event possible. Of course, to the National School of Political Science and Public Administration for hosting us, to Alex Pleshica, who helped us with the technical part, to Anca Goga, who made the poster for the conference, to Cosmin Grigore, who helped us to stream the event on our Fanel page, to our guest, Associate Professor Luciana Alexandra Ghica. Thank you, Luciana. And of course, to our keynote speaker, Professor Cynthia Enlow. We were truly honored to host you this afternoon, and we are very, very glad that you accepted our invitation. Hopefully there will be a next event or a future event weren't discussed and that are very important. I think that the main message or the most important idea that comes from this discussion is that that we need to keep working to spread the feminist ideas, and that we need to keep that we have got to keep resisting to the male-dominated description of the world, so to speak. And also, please join me in wishing a very happy birthday to Professor Liliana Popescu. She celebrated her birthday this Monday. She was working very hard for this event, so probably she will catch on this weekend, probably. So thank you very much all for joining us, and for those who watched us on our Facebook pages, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, everybody. Stay healthy.
We are going
Yes.
to stay a little bit out
Just
of the
yeah, a
stream.
little bit after we
little
finish the
bit
live.
after.
Okay.
Live.